Did you hear the news about Drake today?
The fact that he's suing UMG or Universal over defamation because Kendrick released an album defaming him.
Yeah, man. Whenever I saw that, you know what? I just came to the realization.
What's that?
I saw the light.
Hold on. Boo!
Oh man, and welcome back everybody to Dad Jokes, the podcast. Just kidding. This podcast is called Hey Listen to This. It is the best music podcast on this side of the Mississippi, hosted by two dashingly good looking men who share the same middle name. I am the one. I am the only. I am the bringer of dad jokes, Ryan James Kearns.
And I am the one, the only, the sufferer of dad jokes, Matthew James Durzick. I'll tell you what, if you went with I Seen the Light, you could have made a Tyler the Creator reference and really thrown things off, but you didn't, so I'll at least give you that.
Yeah, that whole Drake news today still kind of blew my mind. I'm like, oh my goodness, dude, you're that butthurt over a rap beef? Like, you should know what you got yourself into whenever you decided to start throwing shots, man. If you can't take the heat, get out of the kitchen. And then don't sue the kitchen for bringing the heat.
Exactly, yeah. I mean, that's just, you can't go into a beef. You can't say, I want to fight, and then get hurt because someone fought you. Like, that's not how any of this works. I'll have to listen to that. We may touch that controversial album down the line because, some say it's a good one by Mr. Kendrick Lamar. But we're not here today to talk about Kendrick Lamar. What we are here to do is what we do every week, which is go over albums that we have chosen, that we have either listened to and said, ooh, I like this, or maybe I don't like this. But ultimately, at the end of the day, we want the other person and you all to take a listen to this. And Ryan, where did we go last week?
So last week, we finally took a look at the 2005 release by the one, the only, the group led by Mr. Connor Oberst, and that group is called Bright Eyes, and we looked at his album, I'm Wide Awake, It's Morning, and yeah, even though I was very familiar with the album prior to the review, I was very happy taking taking a deeper dive into the album for the purposes of our show. I thought it was a good experience. I'm glad that you enjoyed the album. I'm glad that you, I like it whenever, we bring, when we do these reviews, and sometimes we have the same top tracks and bottom tracks, but with that review we didn't, we had similar vibes and feelings, but specifically our top tracks didn't line up for the most part, if I can remember it correctly.
I think so. I know I think we had maybe one or two disagreements. I think Landlocked Blues, I think, was maybe our biggest disagreement on that. But if you're thinking, well, what did they disagree on? The episode is up and you can listen to it. As like you said, Ryan, I think we both enjoyed the album very much. And we are shifting this week from what could be considered alt country or alternative country to much, much, much more modern country. And when I say modern country, I'm not necessarily meaning modern as in the modern day, but modern as in... for lack of a better term, and this is going to be a term I'm using 5,000 times in this review, maybe not that many, but close, the Nashville machine, if you will. This is pop country from probably its most flourishing decade, which is the 1990s, and perhaps its most successful year of the 90s, which is 1992. And I chose this album last week. Well, Ryan chose it. I gave him a selection. And that is the debut album by one Wynonna Judd, simply titled Wynonna, from 1992. Now, a little bit of background on Wynonna Judd, and particularly her career up to this point. She started out with her mother in a duo called the Judds, which was a very successful duo throughout the 1980s. They had several number one hits on the country charts, such as Why Not Me, Rockin' with the Rhythm, Grandpa, Tell Me About the Good Old Days, Mama, He's Crazy, a lot of them. And their sound was very rootsy and very folksy. Like, you could argue that there was a hint of the Nashville Machine because, Ryan, you have gone to Nashville for music studies and music business. You could probably tell me just as much as anybody else about how things are done in Nashville with the Nashville scene. But a lot of people have said that there's a very calculated nature when it comes to the success of certain country artists and certain country music. That being said, if you listen to the early Judds, you'll hear a very, again, simplistic sound, a very, basic sound of a country song, and the harmonies between Wynonna and her mother, Naomi Judd. And they did this up until the early 90s, whenever it was found out that Naomi had been diagnosed with hepatitis, so that pretty much put her side of the career to an end, which left Wynonna, the daughter, to go on with her solo career. And that brings us to this point in 1992. Now, as far as my personal experience with Wynonna Judd, it's pretty much my personal experience with any country artist from the 90s and the late 80s and the early 2000s, which that I was raised on this stuff. I was born in what they call K-Country, K105, the 88,000 watt monster that still is on the air today. They would play all these country hits, whether it be the new stuff or stuff from a couple years ago or stuff from a couple decades ago. They'd all mix it in together. And for those of you wondering just how much 88,000 watts is as far as a radio station, locally here in the Pittsburgh area, we have a station called WDV. That's a classic rock station, sort of like the heralded big monster that's heard throughout all Western Pennsylvania. That's at 50,000 watts. So 88,000 watts is not only almost double that, but it's actually above FCC limits. But the reason that it's able to do it because they were grandfathered in, so they can simply just dominate throughout Youngstown and wherever else. And so I knew a lot of these songs off the album beforehand, particularly the singles, which we'll get into. And for the record, there are 4 singles on this first album that she released. 3 of them went to number 1. So this was a very successful album, the most successful of her solo career. But yeah, that's pretty much my background on Wynonna Judd. Ryan, what's yours?
My background is bare minimum, to be honest with you. I knew that she was a person and she did music, and that's essentially it. Whenever we get to the specific track, when I listened to the album for the first time and I came across that track in particular, I was just like, oh, I know this song. And that's basically it. I hate to be so basic Sam over here, but I am what I am.
Well, that's kind of part of what makes this podcast great, is that sometimes we'll get into an album like Metallica or maybe something along the lines of, let's see, maybe Bob Dylan's Blood on the Tracks, where we kind of are already familiar with what we're dealing with, and we can sort of dive into our experiences with the artist a little bit more. But a lot of times, it's just one of us that has that background. The other is like, cool, let's talk about it. So, I think that is the proper case here, but what do you say we dig into this hot country album from 1992?
Yeah. I'm willing to do what it takes, man.
You see, now that should have been the intro. That should have been the intro right there. But dad jokes will stand, and they will go as so. So we'll start with What It Takes, which is the first track off this album. And again, having come into this album with an expectation based off the singles that I had known for the majority of my life, this song was an interesting choice for an opening track. It's not bad in any way, shape, or form, but it's a very basic track. It sounds very rootsy. It sounds very sort of, down low, sort of almost I wouldn't say like very folky because it's way too produced to be folky, but there's sort of that rock element to it, that rock soul element, almost like something you'd hear from like an Emmylou Harris or maybe a Linda Ronstadt more specifically, that has sort of the slick production, but it has that rhythmic drive, and it's not surprising that some of the musicians on this track in particular are Leyland Sklar on bass, who was a bassist for many studio musicians throughout the 1970s. Rick Marotta, same thing. But really, this song is just driven by Wynonna's voice, and she turns in the first of many fantastic vocal performances on this album. The lyrics, for which she does not write any of them on this record, are written by Brendan Croker, and they're pretty solid lyrics about, trying to do whatever it takes for you to find happiness in this world, and no matter what it takes, I'm going to put this smile upon my face. It's a very basic track, and again, a very interesting one to have as your lead off, but I don't hate it. It's not in my top three, and for the record, I have a top three and a bottom two with this album.
So before I give my thoughts on what it takes, I have a top three and just a single bottom track on this record here. So we'll see how the rest of the discussion goes. But regarding what it takes, a lot of what you talked about, I share similar kind of vibes on. I feel like I'm a little bit more into the lyric aspect than you are, and I'll start there and then go backwards in terms of my other thoughts about the track here. I took note with how the verses are specifically structured here, and I thought that was kind of nice because the whole concept of what Wynonna was going for here was just trying to do what it takes to find purpose in life, and just trying to make sense of it all at the end of the day. So you get verse 1 where it seems like she has this sense of nihilism. You get lyrics like, I want to drive my car wherever they're driving faster. I want to sail the ship as long as I can be the master. Basically saying hey, I want to go in a direction. I want to do a thing, but not with a purpose. I just want to do a thing. And maybe it's not a sense of nihilism. Maybe that might be the incorrect word to use there, but that's the way I interpreted that verse there. Verse 2 seems to be shifting focus into finding a purpose, and you get lyrics like, don't want to work real hard if it means that I ain't living. I mean, it just seems like she's shifting her focus and having more of a purpose in life other than just doing a thing for the sake of doing a thing. And then in verse 3, it seems she's really embracing the confidence that she's bringing to the table. The lyrics are matching the vocal delivery because, I'm right there with you. Her vocal delivery on this here track, it's very good. And it's good without being loud. You can really get behind the sense of what she's trying to do with portraying this confident persona, and she nails it right on the head. But verse 3, you get lyrics like, don't want to be one way, I got to change the seasons, and I'm going to do just what it takes to keep the smile on my face. And hey, she's open to change her ways. She's willing to be water to adapt to whatever life brings her way. I thought that was an interesting way that the lyrics progress, verse versus verse versus verse. I did like the production and the instrumentals. I share the same thoughts as you. They're kind of they're there, they do the purpose that they're intended to do. It's not bad by any means, but there's nothing really stand out-ish about it. The only thing that I noticed is the guitar was adding lines at the ends of phrases that Wynonna was singing, and it almost creates a call and response dynamic that I really do appreciate whenever I hear that within music. The instrumental break in this track here is pretty solid. It fleshes out the melody a little bit more. Overall, though, it's Again, just a solid opening track. I did appreciate what it brought to the table, but it did not land in my top three. Just missing that little, like, extra, like, nugget to, like, kick it up a notch.
I completely agree, and I think that's like my biggest criticism of this track, especially considering it is the album opener, is the fact that again, there's nothing wrong with it. The lyrics are good, the performances by the instrumentalists are good, and Wynonna's voice is great. But for an opening track, there really wasn't that extra pop. There wasn't that sort of moment of like, oh, we're going on a ride here. It's about as standard as a track as you could possibly get. It's a very good standard, but again, like I agree with you. It needed that little something to sort of lilt it a little higher. But again, I don't have any like massive complaints. I mean, this is a good track. It's just that's what it is. It's a good track, and nothing really else to say about it.
So, going on to the next track here, She Is His Only Need. So, we go from, like, this confident, like, country, like, opening track, which both me and Matt have come to the consensus is it's just, like, it's a good track. Like, nothing, it knows what it does. Maybe it could do a little bit more, but it's a pretty standard track. Now we get into, like, a ballady kind of track. And, again, the production here was a little bit cut and dry, pretty standard, like slow country ballad music from the early '90s. Like you know what you're getting here. I will say though, like I do appreciate the opening verse where like she does a good job setting the scene, and like it's almost like it's what country, it's what this is what draws me to country as a genre as a whole. Wherever like it's a storytelling genre where like you can really, it's almost like reading a book, and like the opening verse sets the scene really well. I do appreciate that. However, with this track here, this is where I'm gonna start dinging Wynonna, dinging points off the review for her, because one thing that I noticed immediately whenever we got to the choruses is the chorus here is way too wordy, man. Like, you can trim it down. There's way too much fat on the bone here. Now, I'm not saying you like just change it to like what's going on later on in the outro, because like you can maybe have a little bit more meat on the bone, but dude, like pop music, country music aside, like even like just music in general, like you have to have like a chorus that serves a purpose. There's just way too much going on here, in my honest opinion. And then on top of that, like in that chorus, like dude, like she starts sounding a little bit rough during the line, because without her, like whenever she hits at her, like it didn't land well on my earbuds. However, one thing I will note about this track here is I do like the lyric where she's talking about like ring on her finger and one on the ladder, drawing the the contrast between career ambitions and like love life, like which was it's still a relevant topic nowadays, but I think in the early 90s, it was like, when women were shifting their focuses from being that stay-at-home housewife to actually making a name for themselves and like actually being strong, independent women, but within the context of being within a relationship. It's a complicated balance that I can't speak to possibly because one, I am male, but I digress as a whole. But yeah, overall though, She's His Only Need. I'm gonna be honest with you, this is my least favorite track on the album, and it's due to the wordy chorus. And whenever I hear, vocals that are getting missed, dude, like my thoughts about that. You're a professional singer. Take a break. Go get a glass of water. Get a cup of tea with honey in it. Try again tomorrow. You don't need to put this on, to tape. Like, this should never have made it past the cutting room floor.
So, I slightly disagree about her vocals. I don't think she missed them as bad as you think it is. I will say it was I think the issue with the chorus and the way she sings on the chorus has more to do with the structure of the song than it is the actual her voice. I think her voice on this track, throughout the track, is fine. I just think the structure of the chorus is way off, and I wholeheartedly agree with you. The chorus, and honestly, the majority of the song is just very, very wordy. It's almost like they listened to two Joni Mitchell songs, try to pigeonhole them into a country ballad setting, and it really does not work that well. It just sort of flies all over the place at a million miles a minute while somehow still being a slow ballad. This is my second least favorite track on the album, and I'll get to why one is worse later on. And what really baffles me about this song, and why it's so low on my consideration, is that I mentioned at the start of the review that this album had 3 number one hits. This was one of them. This hit number one on the country charts. And not only that, it was the number 18 song for the entire year of 1992, which is mind-blowing to me because this song is not that good. Like, even for like mid country ballads or country ballads in general being sort of blasé throughout the late 80s and early 90s, like this one just, again, I won't go as far as calling it a train wreck because I do, whenever I hear Wynonna sing She Is His Only Need in the outro, which does sound good, I can appreciate those parts, but again, it just feels so forced the majority of the time. And it really makes you wonder just how powerful this Nashville machine is that this became a number one hit. Because again, as popular as Wynonna is, and we'll get to some good reasons why later, this is not one of them.
So, just to set the scene of what was going on in 1992, because, in my head, that's the year that I always associate with, Nirvana breaking with, Smells Like Teen Spirit. No, the album, never mind, sorry. But I just fact-checked myself in in the episode here. I'm like, oh, no, that was actually released in 91. But albums that came out in 1992, The Chronic, Rage Against the Machine, Check Your Head. There was, a prevailing, it's interesting that this song did as well as it did in that era. I know it was a different market and everything like that, but, it's just interesting because, this song is, it's something after all, man.
Yeah, and just to clarify, when I say number one, I mean a number one on the country charts. That's another thing, too, is that even for as popular as country was becoming throughout the early 90s and into the mid-90s, for whatever reason, and reasons I'm sure are probably mired in some sort of, backlog safe that's, locked away behind 3 cages. One of them has tigers, another has mounds of cocaine, that we don't know why songs of the country era weren't as successful as, say, your average Mariah Carey hit or your average Alice in Chains hit, or what the case may be. But still, even in just the country standards, because again, I was raised on country music and I've come to love that sort of stuff even as an adult, I don't get why this song was so successful. Again, it's fine. If you're listening to the album on a drive, you're probably not going to be as so I've talked about this before. This song is fine as long as you're not paying attention to it, but that shouldn't be the bar for most songs. The bar should be, hey, this is good, and I can find some things I like about it.
Dude, that's my favorite backhanded compliment that you ever give, music in this show here. It's fine if you don't pay attention to it. it's like, you're eating, this delicious sandwich, but it's just it's fine if you don't taste it.
Yeah. This bat won't hurt you as long as you don't feel the pain. What?
All right, man. So the next track.
The next track is I Saw the Light, and we go from a country ballad to a more up-tempo piece, which, while we're talking about chart success, was also a number one hit, and not only was it number one when it charted, It was the number one song of 1992. So She His Only Need was at 18. This was number one for the entire year. And before I get into my thoughts about the song, I just want to reiterate like how big of a deal that is, because there were some heavy hitting songs in 1992. So this was the number one song of 1992. Number two was Billy Ray Cyrus with Achy Breaky Heart, which did in fact hit the pop top 40 that year. It hit the pop top 5 and became the first song to enter the top 40 from the country charts since 1986. Other songs in the year-end countdown. Reba McEntire's Their Life Out There at number 3. Garth Brooks with What She's Doing Now at number 4. Brooks and Dunn with Boot Scootin' Boogie at number 7. Vince Gill with I Still Believe in You at number 8. Brooks and Dunn again with Neon Moon at number 9. Songs like John Anderson's Straight Tequila Night at number 16. Mary Chapin Carpenter's I Feel Lucky at number 15. These are songs that even today on like classic country stations are still revered as high marks. These are songs that made 1992 the big year that it was in country, especially Boot Scootin' Boogie. Like, you could hear that pretty much at any like local bar in Western Pennsylvania and probably half the country still to this day. And it's one of those country songs that people think about when they think of like 90s country, like more so than like people who don't listen to country know what Boot Scootin' Boogie is. And this song was more successful than that. Now, why would that be? Well, I would say it's because it's a really good song. The hook on this song is phenomenal, where Wynonna's voice once again hits all the right notes. The way it builds throughout the verses into the chorus, particularly the lyrics about how she basically catches her boyfriend, husband, whatever, cheating on her, and then basically spends the rest of the song saying, okay, well, you can't touch me anymore. Get your hands off my red dress because I'm not wearing this thing for you anymore. You know, you think that love is blind, but not this time. I really like this song a lot. And I think one other big moment for me was at the end of the solo before the final chorus, where it has that vocal build where the background vocals are saying, I saw the light, I saw the light, I saw the light, was a really nice touch. And so we go from my second least favorite track with She Is His Only Need to my favorite track on the album in I Saw the Light.
So, you want to hear the funny thing about that?
What's that?
I'm seeing the light there with you, my friend, because this is my favorite song off the whole album.
Yes.
we did it, man.
We did it.
But so yeah, this song rolls. Like, I'm right there with you with like the hook, and also like you mentioned how the bridge works really well. Like, I was really taken back by it. But what instantly sold me on this track here is just like the fact that when it began, I was just like, oh, okay, this is like, you know, like a standard, like, you know, love song, but a little bit more up-tempo. But then the rug gets pulled out from underneath you, and it turns into like the the early days. Oh, hey, men are garbage, and yeah, you know, I'm a strong, independent woman, and I saw the light. And like, I absolutely loved that. It made it for an immensely entertaining listen, and it had that weekend effect. And what I mean by the weekend, the song I Can't Feel My Face, that song repeats the same lyrics over and over again, but it doesn't really take away from like the enjoyability factor of that track. And I have the same thoughts with I Saw the Light, because the lyrics for the most part are basically the same, but at the end of the day, it's a highly enjoyable track due to, like, you know, the production actually, like, you know, being fun and, like, you know, something you can really sink your teeth into. And also the clever twist where, like, you know, like I mentioned, how it seemed like it was going to be a love song, but it's not. The vocal delivery is nice. I love the chorus, and I love how it's bookended by the same phrase. I thought that was like a nice, like, you know, way to structure that. But yeah, I Saw the Light is easily my favorite track on this album.
Yeah, and it deservedly so because, again, like you say, the hook is great, the lyrics are great, the singing on it is great. Again, it doesn't, like I said, I didn't hear the strain that you did on She's His Only Need, but there's no argument about it here because her vocals just are perfect pretty much throughout the entirety of the track. And it still gets a lot of decent airplay on, like I said, the classic country stations. It's just a really good song, and I'm glad that the general public, at least the general country public of 1992, they got it right with this one. They got it right.
I absolutely agree. All right, so the next track is My Strongest Weakness. And yeah, this song here, we go from the highs of I Saw the Light to like just a very cute and simple song. Love the performance from Wynonna here. I thought it was super solid. Like, for the most part, even though like she didn't write any of the lyrics here in the whole album, she does do a great job convincing the listener that this is coming from her own life experience. Like, I'm gonna tip my hat to her, give her roses on that. The songwriting here, though, it's pretty cut and dry. Like, you get the verse, you get the chorus, you get the verse, you get the chorus, and it's basically cutting out after that. And the song is basically about dealing with heartbreak and contending with doubts about loving again. And I don't really have much else to say about it. Like, this song's fine. It lands well on my ears, but there's not really too much to really make it pop or make it sink, if you know what I mean.
I understand what you're saying. However, I am going to slightly disagree with you. Not as far as your understanding of it, because I think you're pretty much right on the money. But I enjoyed it a little bit more. It's landing at number 3 in my top 3. Because, again, it really is not much of anything that you haven't described. It's basically... what I love about this track is that, especially for anyone who's going to listen to this album, i.e. you, and anyone who listened to it after the episode, may not realize there were a lot of songs in the late 80s and early 90s country scene that were only country because the person singing it was a country singer. And this is one of those songs. Like, if you gave this exact backing track to the likes of Whitney Houston or Celine Dion, it's not going to sound like a country song because it's not. Like, you have basic backing of, a little bit of guitar, a little bit of bass, some drums, and that electric piano is so late 80s, early 90s. And that basically means this is an adult contemporary track that is only made country by Wynonna's very strong Southern accent. That being said, her performance on this track is phenomenal. Like, the way she ebbs and flows with the songs, how she sort of, sings very normally on the verses and kicks it up a notch for the choruses. It's executed perfectly. And again, even though it's not country, the production is very good too. Like, it sounds clean. I can hear everything she's saying. Nothing's getting in the way. It's paced properly, unlike She Is His Only Need. And yeah, there's really not a whole lot to say about the song, but it landed so well on my ears that it does go into my top 3 at number 3.
I wonder if that has something to do with the fact that this kind of music is a little bit more in your wheelhouse, and I'm still but a novice when it comes to, country as a whole. I'm getting there due to, our ventures into various country albums, and that is ultimately why I picked country as the next genre that we're going to be talking about, because I do want to grow as a music fan. But yeah, with this song here, my opinions are my opinions, and I absolutely respect yours. We already went over the only track on the album that I had any criticisms on, and I'm curious to see what the track that you put at the bottom of the barrel here. But we'll get to it when we get to it, my friend.
Yeah. Just one final note about my strongest weakness, because you mentioned how Wynonna sings so strongly and is doing a good job of interpreting other people's lyrics. Ironically enough, the co-writers of this song are songwriter Mike Reed and Naomi Judd, her mom, co-wrote this song. So maybe that would help the performance along a little bit. And speaking of Naomi Judd, it's time to move on to the fifth track on this album, which is When I Reach the Place I'm Going. And this song is not in my top three, but I'm so glad that this song is on the album just from a historical context. Because even though it's not written by Naomi Judd, it's written by Emory Gordy Jr. and Joe Henry. Naomi Judd is a background vocalist on this song. She's the one singing with Wynonna. So, for all intents and purposes, this is a Judds song. And I love that it's on here because it basically reminds listeners of the past, what Wynonna is coming from. And for those who are just getting here, it's teaching new listeners who'd be like, oh, new sound, what the old sound was. But that being said, I really don't have a whole hell of a whole lot else to say about this track because it's a good track. It's not a great track. The singing is very well. It does have like that more of a rootsier feel than What It Takes. It feels almost like an extra from the Oh Brother Where Art Thou soundtrack. Almost seems like a bit of like a gospel thing going on between the two, which is a vibe that they shared throughout a majority of their career, especially towards the end of it. So yeah, no, it's a very solidly produced song. Lyrics are pretty simple about reaching the place I'm going, whether it's a destination here on Earth or in the afterlife. But just by reading the title, you can kind of already get the vibe of where the song is going. But yeah, no, it's a good song. I like it.
I like how you added the little tidbit about based on the album, based on the track title, you kind of know where this album's going, especially with the very last track here on the album. But we'll get to that when we get to it. However, I thought that this song here was a cool way to end off side A of the record because we've seen typical country 90s stuff up until this point in different kind of flavors, and with this track here, like you mentioned, you get a different spin on that, and it shows to the versatility of what Wynonna can bring to the table. I did dig the stripped back instrumentation quite a bit. It was a nice change up for me, and this track here is basically having Wynonna go through through a rebirth. You get lyrics such as "We have tears to heal the pain" that you can find in verse 2. You think about going through suffering, but it's through that suffering that and the expression of that you can actually come out on the other side of it. I thought that was a nice touch, and just overall though, I really did dig what Wynonna did do vocally here. Again, solid job. I'm always impressed, and I've talked about this in many of our reviews of different records. I love it when a singer can be passionate but without volume. That does take skill, and Wynonna does that in spades in this track here. And yeah, I don't really have much else to say that you haven't really already talked on, and I think I've already kind of stepped on your shoes a little bit with this track here. This track here goes above a couple of the other tracks on the album, and it could have easily cracked into my top 3, but I think for the reason that it didn't crack into the top 3 is I was more drawn to this track as a change of pace as opposed to, hey, I actually really enjoyed aspects about this track here.
Which is totally fair because, again, I think this song is a very good song. And again, I think I appreciate it more for the details behind it than the details of it. Because, again, it's a pretty solid song in that respect. But again, the fact that it's basically a Judds song on a Wynonna album is a nice little trick by not just her and her mother, but by the people at Curb who released this album in 1992. And by the way, one other thing, I love how you refer to this as the end of Side A, because this is a country album from 1992. Vinyl was pretty much dead by that point. So if anybody has this album on vinyl, I will be shocked, impressed, and want to know where your location is, because this was the height of the CD era. Even though it was only, I think, 6 years after they were first commercially released. I listened to you say end of side A, and I was like, hold on. But yeah, that's just a little fun side note. Before we head to side B of the record, Ryan, I got a question for you.
What is that?
If our listeners are wondering what's the best way to get the good word out about what we do here at Hey Listen to This, how do they do that?
Well, here is the absolute best way that you can do that. Word of mouth. Tell somebody that you trust, and they value your opinion, because then they're more likely to listen to us. But to serve the algorithm gods, the other way that they can support us and help us grow as a show is on that podcasting platform of choice. Make sure that they leave a positive review and do whatever action that is needed to keep up to date with our latest episodes, whether it's a subscribe, a follow, or just do whatever you can to, just interact with every single episode, because, these algorithms, they like to see attention throwing on shows. So, the more that you interact with our stuff by dropping a comment, or, if you're listening to us on YouTube, make sure that you give us a thumbs up. And also, if you want to stay up to date even further, make sure you follow us on all of our social media platforms. We have Facebook, we have Instagram, we have Twitter, because X is not a real thing. And maybe one day we might actually just move out of X and go into Blue Sky. I'm going to make that my goal before the end of the year. We are going to open up a Blue Sky account and say goodbye to Twitter, because yeah, it's cumbersome posting on that platform for me. And also, if you really are daring and you really want to spread the word of our show here, go up to somebody randomly on the street and just say, hey, listen to this.
And then say nothing else, because they're just going to wonder what on earth is like. It's like, okay, I'm listening, and then just walk away. Just let them figure out the rest from that point.
And also, if you're listening to this episode and you're like, oh man, these guys are talking about this album here, and you're scrolling through the feed and you're seeing all the vast genres that we've covered up until this point, and you are like, wait, I really would like them to talk about insert band name here, insert album name here. The way that you can do that is, one, interacting with us on our socials. You can drop a comment on our episode saying, hey, please do this album next, or shoot us an email at ttheylisten@gmail.com. By the way, I didn't give the tagline for all of our socials. Our tagline for all of our socials is ttheylisten. So keeping it simple. And most importantly, for those of you who've been listening to us throughout, from our start until now, or if you randomly picked us up at some point and you're just, listening to us right now, even for the first time, thank you. I absolutely enjoy what me and Matt do here, and I'm glad that you too as well.
And I enjoy it too, man. And I'm glad that we've been doing this for well over a year now. I looked at my Facebook memories today and realized that this is the 1 year anniversary of the release of our Neil Young episode. So that's how long we've been doing this. So moving on from Neil Young and back to Wynonna as we enter side B of this 10-song CD, which is kicked off with No One Else on Earth. And Ryan, I'll let you start.
So remember how I said that I knew a song before doing this review, and I was just like, when that song came on, I was just like, oh hey, yeah, this song. Yeah, this is that song. For those of you who are not listening, like viewing in on the live feed, Matt did shake his head there. So, yeah, No One Else on Earth. It's a good song. For me, the chorus is easily the best part of the song. Like it's a very, I don't want to say it's a simple chorus because that might come across as like a little bit backhanded, but it does its job perfectly well. It lands well on the ears. It brings the song to an emotional point in terms of an enjoyability factor. And that's only served well with how the pre-chorus acts as a bridge to build up the chorus. And on the production side here, I am digging the instrumental hits that you can hear throughout this track, and the instrumental break that I found in this track, it was pretty decent, and the lyrics are basically about somebody talking about how they build up these walls and like holy crap, they randomly let a person in and like this person's affecting their ability to function, and yeah, overall, maybe I could have been a little bit higher on this track here, but the chorus is easily the best part, and that's pretty much it. There's not much else here for me to really dive into. It's a good song though.
It is a good song. I agree with you on that. In fact, it is my second favorite song off the entire album. Because you're dead on the money. Like that chorus pops off so well. And what made me appreciate the song a little bit more because like you said, this is a very familiar song. In fact, I think this is the song that most sort of represents the shift that Wynonna was trying to take in her new direction, because the Judds would never have released a song this poppy or this funky or anything like that. Which isn't to say that they should have, but at the same time, with Wynonna being sort of up in front and center and sort of being sort of this singer as she is, now she's gonna, strut her stuff. And this song is very 90s in that regard, with the fake horns and the fake keyboards and the very processed sound, which is processed in a very, very good way. But what I love about this track being where it is at the start of side B is that it follows When I Reach the Place I'm Going almost as a direct, okay, now that you enjoyed this little flashback to what made the Judds, here's what we're really going for here as far as the new sound. And I think it works so well. Her voice sounds great. The chorus sounds great. I think the guitar solo is also kind of fire, to be honest with you. Not like fire in the, oh my goodness, like, listen, it's the new Eddie Van Halen, but it works well on this track. Yeah, I just really like the song, and it was the third track sequentially on this album to hit number one and finished at number 36 on the final year-end charts. This was the 36th most successful country song of 1992. How this fell 18 behind She Is All You Need, I will never know, but I was born in 1992. I can't control the past. That's what happened. But this is my second favorite song on the album in No One Else on Earth.
You know what, man? I'm actually going to bump up my rating on this track here. But I will say that I am gonna still stick with my top three. Those are locked in, but I'm gonna just bump up the rating just by like 1 point. It shouldn't affect the overall score of the album, but I was maybe being too much of a Debbie Downer, or not really enjoying the good old apple pie that this track here was bringing to the table, or I use whatever metaphor that you're gonna maybe the kids would say appreciating the riz that Wynonna was bringing to the table here.
Okay, we have officially broken the Riz line in this review. I don't know how to feel about any of that. So I think we'll just move on to the next track, which is It's Never Easy to Say Goodbye. And I like this song a lot because it definitely has a bit more of a slower feel, but like you were talking about earlier with She His Only Need, ironically enough. The storytelling aspect of this song is the strongest part of it, because it kind of shifts between a song that explores the stages of saying goodbye. It starts from childhood, where you're saying goodbye to somebody as they get off the bus from school, and it sort of goes into people trying to say goodbye to their loved ones as they pass on in the afterlife, and all the stages in between, whether it's lost friendships or lost relationships. And the chorus is by far the best part of this song. The way that Wynonna sings it, once again, is pretty much right on the money. It's no frills. It's just her powerful voice doing powerful things. And on another given day, this could have cracked my top 3. Just missed it this time around. But again, the vocals are great. The production is clean. Everything sounds really, really, really good. And as far as album tracks go, like non-singles, I'd probably put this at the top.
Okay. So I like this song as well. I'm right there with you in terms of like the storytelling aspect being a major draw for me. I really do like how the verses are structured. I'm not going to really dive too much into there because like you already did an excellent job diving into that. I just thought that was very interesting. It's all the different ways that people can say goodbye to people in their lives. Again, the vocals are passionate without being loud, and I absolutely do love that. I will say though, like the one time I was listening to this track, maybe I was not, I didn't have enough coffee in that moment of my life, but like I was starting to really just sink into the feelings, and I was kind of dozing off. But that's probably just due to the slow nature of the track itself. However, outside of that, the instrumental break is solid. The groove on the chorus is just so in the pocket. It's ridiculous how tight they sound. Like I absolutely love that. And we've arrived at my second favorite track on the album. Excellent verses. The passion with the vocals are an instant draw for me, and I just love just how tight everything sounds, especially within that chorus.
Completely understandable. Again, I would probably put this in my top 3 on another day. It just got beat out by my strongest weakness. And I think another reason why it didn't crack my top 3, and I was saving it until after you said your piece, is that there's another song from the 90s that I'm very familiar with that I think does this song one better on the same exact subject matter. And that is a song by Patty Loveless called How Can I Help You Say Goodbye? It's a little slower, a little bit more of a ballad, and by God, it is like one of the most tear-jerking songs of the 90s. If you come away from that song thinking oh, well, this is just, stupid and nonsense, you have no soul. And I understand it's 2024, but at the same time, you still, if you listen to that song, you're just like, huh. So I think that sort of pins it against this song, and I would take the Patty Loveless song probably 9 times out of 10, but that's not taken away from this song. This song is written well, it's sung very well, and the production is very good. Again, if I were ranking this from 1 to 10, all the tracks, I'd probably put this at number 4.
Okay. Maybe if I were to hear that song that you just referenced, it might knock this track down to maybe my 3rd favorite track, or even bump it out of my top 3 altogether. But it'll be an interesting experiment that I'm going to propose, but ultimately never do because I have the attention span of a squirrel. I digress.
I'll send you a link after the episode to make sure that's not the case.
Okay. Just make sure you do that.
In fact, I might just send it to you right now.
All right.
I'll send you a link mid-episode.
All right. And my phone's on silent, so it's not going to go off. There we go. So cool. While you're sending the link, I'm going to talk about how a little bit of love goes a long, long way. And so this is a great song that picks up the pace of the album after the previous ballad, and even before that, you get that the pop song "No One Else on Earth." Like, it I just really did like what this song brought to the table. The guitar work here is actually kind of wild compared to what we've heard previously in the album up until this point. And like, even from that for the whole album, because like the next two tracks that are remaining on the album, like you don't get that on any moment within the whole album. And like I instantly was just like, oh, okay, cool, I get that a lot. And the chorus here, it works so well. And one thing that I really did appreciate about the chorus is how she drags out the word love to be two syllables. Like, I thought that was a nice effect that I was just like, oh, I see you, Wynonna. Like, really just diving into, like, expressing her vocals in such a passionate fashion. The bridge is solid, and song is basically about the effects of love has on a person. And yeah, like, so I'm looking up lyrics right now, and you get lyrics of like, my heart's so busy jumping that it skips a beat, got me running around in circles, dancing in the street. It's basically about like just being so excited about being in love, and I really did dig what it brought to the table in that aspect. And yeah, we go for my second favorite song, and it's never easy to say goodbye to my third favorite song with A Little Bit of Love Goes a Long, Long Way. Fantastic song. I think the main thing that drew me to this song here specifically was just the guitar work and the production. Like, because for the majority of the album, like, you don't get that throughout it. Like, this almost seems like a red-headed stepchild, or just like, so it almost seems like it doesn't belong within the context of the album. But then again, it shows to the versatility that Wynonna as a singer would tackle songs like this, and my hat's off to her.
Yeah, no, I'm right there with you. This song's not in my top three. Obviously, we have already revealed what those are. But man, this song, I'm surprised that this song was not chosen as a single. And a certain other song on this album that we've mentioned several times, I won't mention again unless I have to, did become a single, because this is such a great, like, driving song. It rocks real hard. I guess the one thing that sort of set it back for me a little bit, not in a bad way, like, oh, this is bad, but it just didn't like pop, is I think the lyrics are pretty much as simple as they get about, how, again, like, when I reach the place I'm going, you look at the name of the song, you kind of already know what it's about, and that a little bit of love goes a long, long way. But you mentioned the guitar and the production on this song. This song was co-written by Marty Stewart, who also plays guitar on this. And for those who are not familiar with Marty Stewart, he himself had a lot of solo success, particularly at the late 80s, early 90s level. Very traditionalist singer-songwriter, but definitely got into a bit more of the country pop scene around the time. Songs like Tempted, Hillbilly Rock, Burn Me Down, songs like that really are, again, still played a lot. So you can definitely hear his influence on this track, being very sort of a hard, fast shuffle that it is. I really don't have much more to it to add to that than that. You did a really good job of illustrating why the song kicks ass like it does, because again, it's just like, this is one of those songs where like country DJs could probably sneak it in and get away with it. And to any country DJs that by any off chance are listening to us, that is my challenge to you. Sneak this song in somewhere and see if anybody picks up. Because it, like, if you're blasting this on the radio, like, it stands out really, really well.
So, Matt, before we move on to the penultimate track on this album here, I noticed something that you've not talked about your least favorite track on the album yet.
I have not, and we have two tracks to go. We have All That Love From Here and Live With Jesus. So, much like you did last week, I think it was last week or sometime in the last few weeks, challenging me to guess which song it is. I'm going to let you guess which of these is my least favorite.
This is your least favorite, this song here.
And you would be correct. This is my least favorite song on the album. And before I explain why, because it's a very, very, very simple explanation, Wynonna's singing sounds good, and the production sounds fine. It's not a bad song in the same way that She Is His Only Need was. But the reason this song is my least favorite track on the album is very simple. In the 4 listens that I gave this album before we did this review, I forgot about it while I was listening to it. And that is not a good sign for a song. Now, granted, I think that might have a little bit to do with the juxtaposition, again, coming off of A Little Bit of Love Goes a Long, Long Way, to come down to this song, which is about as bare bones ballad as you get. Like, there's really not a whole lot of meat on the bone to start with. Like, it sounds fine, but man, I couldn't tell you, like, anything about what Wynonna sings other than the title of it. And, like, it didn't come to me because I was thinking about what songs I least liked on this album. And again, on my final listen, I was just like, oh, right, this song exists. And I keep reminding myself of it. So that's why it's getting the moniker. Again, it's not, I don't think it's as bad a song as She's Only Need, but that at least in a couple moments where I was like, okay, I enjoy this. There's just nothing here that grabbed me at all.
I have a theory of what might have occurred other than it just being a pretty bland song, because I'm right there with you. Like, I could have easily put this into like a bottom track kind of tier, but like, I will start by expanding on my theory of what caused you to forget about the song in the first place, and what kind of what I thought was going to be your original reason for disliking this song as a whole is the chorus here is too long. Again, like, she goes back to the the wordy nature of the earlier one of the earlier tracks is She Is His Only Need, where it's too much. And also on top of that, it shifts in the middle of it, where like it almost becomes like a wholly different kind of song, and not in a way that's organic, that serves a song in a songwriting songwriting purpose, but it's almost just like, oh hey, I'm drinking coffee, and then all of a sudden it turns into beer. It just automatically shifts with no purpose, with no need. Like, they do totally two different things, totally two different kind of beverages, and that was a big turnoff for me. But with that and the pretty cut and dry production, because if I can remember correctly, which I do believe I can, it goes back to that stripped back instrumentation that we found in the song When I Reach the Place I'm Going, but it really doesn't do too much else to add to what that specific track was bringing to the table. It almost takes away from that momentum of that track. The vocal performance on this track, though, it's pretty solid. I had no complaints about it. And I do like how the lyrics here are structured and how they're drawing connections to, the singer's past, and how she still feels love from it today. She came from this, and she's feeling the effects of her upbringing, and it's making her the woman that she is today. But yeah, overall though, it's not a bad track in my opinion, but you shorten up that chorus and you make it one cohesive message. I'm here for it. But otherwise, it's an okay track, man.
Yeah, and I think, again, that's probably what drove it down for me, is that, again, it sounds fine, but it's just okay. And, again, coming down from not just A Little Bit of Love, but No One Else on Earth, or even It's Never Easy to Say Goodbye, that's 3 heavy hitters in a row. And this just sort of talking about taking a break and, coming back tomorrow. This feels like the musical equivalent of that. So yeah, like again, this it was a toss between this one and She Is His Only Need as the worst, and I just again there was a little bit more good with She's His Only Need despite its jumbleness. But again, I think it's safe that we can move on to the final track of this album, which is Live with Jesus.
So for me, this track here was a good way to wrap up the album. I've taken note of how like a lot of the albums that we discuss and how they tend to wrap up like the whole experience of it for the listener. You get like the putting a bow on it effect with the Bob Dylan Blood on the Tracks, Taylor Swift, Tortured Poet Society, Sabrina Carpenter. Like you get those moments, and then you get moments of like big, epic, like, wrapping up the themes like Bright Eyes, Spanish love songs. And I might be missing a couple of like examples here or there, but like, I've just noted that like how artists and bands tend to wrap up albums. And here, I thought this was kind of like, I don't know, like maybe a little bit out of left field and maybe a combination of just putting a bow on it, but kind of maybe wrapping up themes here because, throughout this whole album, you get lyrics about dealing with heartbreak, wanting to find purpose, and, feeling love and connecting to your roots. And, like, what this has all led the listener to is like, living with Jesus. Now this, maybe I might be reading a little bit too much into the sequencing of this record because like, essentially this is not a concept album by any means. I feel like I have the tendency as a music fan to draw every album into a concept album, and maybe that's a bad habit that I need to break right now. But that being said, Live with Jesus, vocals are on point again, once again here. The production here, like, I was taken back by it with, like, the almost, like, rootsy, dirty country blues feel. Like, like, the way just everything was brought to the table, like, you really kind of could picture this being, like, in Nashville, like, in a rootsy kind of church. Like, I really did appreciate that. And the chorus is solid. Like, you get the backgrounds vocals working well, and at points they actually create a call and response dynamic with the lead vocals that Wynonna is like bringing to the table, and I'm always a sucker for that. But overall, I really did appreciate Live with Jesus as a closing track on the album. It was another style that Wynonna explored and brought to the table, and she nails it pretty well, and I'm very impressed with it.
I'm very impressed with it too, and pretty much everything you said about this track from a standpoint of Wynonna's vocals sounding as good as they are, the background vocals and the instrumentation, I'm pretty much right there with you the whole way. It definitely sounds like a roots gospel song that you wouldn't be, feel too weird hearing on like a late Johnny Cash album, like the American recordings that he did before and after his death. Not that he recorded after his death, but you know what I mean. That's when they were released. But the big thing I took away from this particular track, because I like it a lot too, is the fact that all of these instruments and the background vocals, that basically anything on this track that isn't Wynonna Judd was one guy. And this guy's name, he's the writer of the song, his name is Paul Kennerly. He plays all the instruments, did the background vocals, and most impressively, as I'm reading from the liner notes of the CD that I have, this was recorded at his house.
Oh,
like this is a home recording, and this dude just like recorded all these instruments. Again, not that there's a lot of them, but for it to sound as professional as it does for a home recording, especially in 1992, is super, super impressive. Doesn't necessarily lift the song to like top 3 status for me because again, once you get past again the details behind the song and look at the details in the song, there's really not a whole lot there, but it's still very, very good. Sung well, played well, and a great way to close out the album.
yeah, like that's one thing that I will note about my experience with like, seeing what Nashville as a music scene brings to the table, because you get many, I don't want to say many, but like, a good bit of like, home recording setups. Like, we took a tour of like this one recording studio that was literally in this guy's house. So like, that is a common theme that you find in the Nashville scene as a whole.
Yeah, and again, for as much as the high-end production of some of the songs is, it is kind of nice for not just this album, but for this, big production from the National Machine to end on a very simplistic note. And because it ends on a simplistic note, Ryan, what does that mean?
We did it, man.
We did it. 10 tracks up, 10 tracks down, and we have reached the place we were going.
Ah, I see what you did there. You could have went with a pun off of her name and like tried to be silly, be like, we found out what makes Wynonna, but like, props to you, man. Like, you nailed it.
Thank you. I appreciate that. So I will go first with my overall rating of this album, and full disclosure, I went into this last week after we were done taping the Bright Eyes episode, saying that you may have picked the fourth best out of the 4 albums I had up. I'm going to change that. I think this album, at the very least, is better than the Trace Adkins option we would have taken, because this album is really good. Not like really good in the holy crap, this revolutionized American music, and people for generations are talking about the success of Wynonna Judd. She has her signature in the Moons of Jupiter. Not like that, but for a early 90s country album, especially one that was expected to do like high numbers, this is really, really good and well produced. There's not a bad song on this album. Yes, there's a confused song and a very forgettable song, but even then, like I said earlier, at the very least, you can listen to it in the background and feel okay. Like, there's nothing that's offensive, nothing that's bewildering, nothing that, is an affront to the eardrums. Wynonna singing throughout is fantastic. The production throughout is clean, and even though it has a couple missteps in the middle, I still am going to give this album a pretty solid mark. I'm going to give this a 7.5 out of 10.
Okay. Cool. So for me, this was another solid country album for me to enjoy. Now, it did introduce me to like, a different side of country as a whole, because I don't believe we've talked about like, specifically this era of country, and I was very glad like, I ended up picking this album here, because like, while on the surface, like, most of the songs for my ears, like, are pretty cut and dry, pretty, like, standard country tracks, like we discussed in this review throughout several examples, like, the performances are solid. The lyric writing, once you dive into it, like, there's some good gems within it. You get tracks like It's Never Easy to Say Goodbye, and you also get tracks like, even like the opening track, like What It Takes. I really did appreciate what that had to bring to the table. Some of the songs kind of get lost in the sauce with like She Is His Only Need, and the penultimate track, A Little Bit of Love, not A Little Bit of Love, all of That Love From Here. Like, it gets a little bit in its own ego, and it doesn't know how to like construct a concise thought. However, though, like, those moments are like, not enough to really sink the overall, like, enjoyability of the album, because like, I did really appreciate, A Little Bit of Love Goes a Long Way. And even like the more poppy songs, like No One Else on Earth, I Saw the Light, like those songs are fantastic. So for me, I'm going to give this album here a solid 7 out of 10.
And between the two of us, that averages out to a 7.25 out of 10.
Because math.
Math works, everyone. And for my next album recommendation, there are about a million different directions I could go, because, again, I know, a lot of 90s country, back and forth. But I'm going to take the very direct and easy route with this, and that is the follow-up album by Wynonna Judd, and that is Tell Me Why from 1993. Not as successful as the first one. I think the reason for that is because the more modernized Nashville sound that was being, dominated by the likes of Brooks and Dunn and Garth Brooks and even Reba McEntire or, an up and coming Faith Hill, was starting to take a bit more hold, and Wynonna's style was a bit more, I wouldn't say archaic, but of a different time. But still, I think some of the songs on that album are even better than the ones on here, like the title track, like Only Love. Girls with Guitars is another great one, as is Rock Bottom, and some good album tracks that are scattered in there as well. So that will be my next recommendation based off of this is Wynonna Judd's Tell Me Why from 1993.
So, naturally, I incredibly struggled with, finding a next album recommendation here. But, I'm just going to go with my gut feeling because sometimes you got to listen to your gut, man. You trust your own instincts. You are a strong, independent person. You got here for a reason. You woke up with this morning. You rolled out of bed, and I don't know what other actions you took this morning. You just might be just out of bed at this point. I digress. So, the album that I'm going to recommend is an album that was released in 2020. It's released by a band called Waxahachie, and that album is called St. Cloud. For me, my experience, checking out that album, it really dug into the rootsy aspects of, indie rock, on that singer-songwriter realm, that is fronted by a female lead vocalist. And yeah, not much else to say other than that. I mean, I really did dig what that album brings to the table. I probably should listen to that album again because, whenever I did, spin it the first couple times whenever it came out, I was just like, oh, hey, this is a cool album. And then, my goldfish brain took over and it was just like, okay, on to the next one. But, I really did dig what that album had to bring to the table, and it was the closest comparison that I can think of. What would be a good female-led, country roots album that would be more within my wheelhouse. So, to recap, my selection for next album recommendation is St. Cloud by Waxahachie.
And again, mine is Tell Me Why by Wynonna Judd. And if you've not listened to either of those albums, we highly recommend them, and give them a spin after you give Wynonna's debut a spin. So, Ryan, it is now your turn to select what we will review next on this podcast. What do you have cooked up?
So, we're gonna be, going into either, the two albums that I have up for, discussion here. They are going to be, one album's going to be an album that, both of us should be pretty much familiar with at this point in our lives. The other album is something that, I've never heard anything from this person before, and I can guarantee that you probably haven't either. No disrespect there. But, that album specifically has a connection to another review that we've done in the past. And they're both from different eras of music and just completely different albums in their own right. So, that being said, the way I'm going to have you pick the next review is I'm going to have you choose between two publications. Are you ready?
I am ready.
All right. So, the publications are Rolling Stone or Rough Trade.
Well, I'm up for a challenge just like you are. So I'm going to disavow the obvious choice, and I'm going to pick Rough Trade.
Yeah, I kind of led you to the water there, man. Maybe I shouldn't have, revealed what's behind door number one so hardcore, but... So you've chosen Rough Trade. So for our next review, we are going to be reviewing the 2024 album by the artist, the English recording artist and producer Sophie. It was posthumously released on September 25th, and it is her self-titled second and final studio album. So to recap, our next album that we're going to be talking about is the self-titled album by Sophie that was released this year. I feel like it's a good, good coda to our Brat discussion, because whenever we did do the Brat review, she talked about this producer being a huge influence. So whenever I saw this album landed at number 1 on Rough Trade's top albums of 2024 list, I was kind of intrigued, and I was just like, you know what, I'm gonna put it up for potential review. And I'm glad that we're gonna be able to explore this album together and see what we think about this kind of music even further, because I feel like it's gonna. Brat was its own beast. This might be a whole other animal that we have yet to tackle yet, my friend.
I agree. I think, again, this is going to be a challenge of proportions that, Brat was our only preparation for. And when Brat is your only preparation for something, you are entering a world that you are not familiar with. But much like many reviews we've done in the past, we will reach the place that we are going.